All right, I'm going to call the school committee meeting for August 24th to order. Quickly run down the agenda, which is packed, but with a lot of hopefully relatively short items that we can get done before we adjourn to executive session at 7. So public comment, but nobody's here, so we can skip by that. We have the consent agenda at that point. We'll pass the mic over to Carla briefly for an MSBA Killam designer selection appointment that we need to do. We will then have a discussion, review, approval of the district-wide student handbook with Dr. Stice. We will have a brief summary presentation from Dr. Milczewski on the Community Math Pathways Committee and the timeline that we'll go through as part of the initial advertising of what that is and what we're doing with it. We will then move to old business of the second reading of DBDA. Sean and I have traded notes this afternoon, so we have something for the committee to consider as updates to the 3 bullets we were talking about last time. In the packet is the updated liaison subcommittee and charter review. I don't expect to talk too much about that, but if anybody has any objections, let me know ahead of time or let me know now. Then we'll move to 4 policy updates we have, of which the most important that we get to tonight is ADF, as we're writing a grant that will depend upon that policy update. And then presuming ADF passes, we'll have a brief discussion on the wellness committee, appointment for the committee here as one of our additional subcommittee appointments. Presuming we have time, we'll have reports from Dr. Stice, Dr. Pinto, Dr. Milczewski, and any liaison-related reports, and then we'll adjourn to executive session. I'm going to say this, if we get to everything up to reports, but we don't get to reports, we're going to adjourn after executive session, and we'll skip reports and use 9-7 as our meeting to do those kind of updates. If we don't get through those things, we will probably come back to finish some of the other items. But we'll have that conversation at that point. Okay? So with that said, let's dive in. Motion for the consent agenda, please.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Sean. Any discussion points? All right, seeing none, all in favor? Aye, and it passes 5-0. Okay, so we're moving on to C1, which is the appointment for superintendent MSBA. And Carla, will you give us a brief background and justification for this?
Sure, thank you. So the MSBA has a very prescriptive designer selection process, and they have a very descriptive designer selection panel. So last week, or last time, I probably, I know I did it in the Killam meeting, we misrepresented what the design selection panel was supposed to be. So we have clarification on it, and actually it is so updated that there is an update in my memo. There are 16 total members on that panel. 13 are MSBA members, and 3 are district members, who the MSBA prescribes they would like to see the superintendent, the town manager, and someone from the building committee on that panel. So our legal counsel, town council, suggested that we, because of our charter requirement to only have voting members as residents, because our superintendent, town manager are voting members, they wanted each board to assign their representative. Even though he's technically not representing the school committee, he's just one of the representatives on the committee. But Dr. Milczewski will be a voting member. So what happens in that committee is the 3 of us will go in, Tom Fidel and I, along with 13 members from MSBA, and we will actually vote. Our committee, Killam Committee, will put forth a short list of designers, and we will talk and vote as to who we want as our designer. So I respectfully ask the committee to appoint Dr. Milczewski to this position.
Okay. I think one of the key points of this, the 3 of you are going to advocate as well for who you want the designer selection to be, right? So it's not run just by those 13. They might provide some other input. They may know those in a different way, but based upon what you see, you guys will advocate for who you want.
They actually want us to come with our own individual ideas and not as a group coming forth, and it will be it's unusual for the MSBA to ever go against the district, but if they know that there's a designer who's taxed and has too much work, they may suggest that they're not put forth. But they want it to be a collaborative process, that we're doing it collaboratively. This is different from the OPM selection process,
Gotcha.
so.
And there is no prescriptive thing we have to read as part of this. We can just make a simple motion. Okay. So with that said, Aaron, will you make our motion and we'll move
Because,
ourselves forward?
excuse me,
Yep.
because the motion is because of our town charter, not because of MSBA requirements.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Motion to appoint Dr. Milczewski, the Superintendent of Reading Public Schools, to the Massachusetts School Building Authority's Designer Selection Panel for the Killam School Building Project.
Second.
Seconded by Chuck. Okay, any further discussion? All right, all in favor? All opposed? And it passes 6-0.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Milczewski, or actually, Dr. Stice, we'll turn to you for a quick update on the district-wide student handbook. And it's in our packet for people who had a chance to read, and we can see if there's any feedback or questions, and then hopefully move to approve it. So, Dr. Stice, mic to you.
Thank you very much. I wanted to thank you all for your support and feedback as we go through this process. As you know, last year we made some great gains in getting the handbook standardized, and we were able to make it a little bit more user-friendly this year. The handbook itself is designed to be notification of legal requirements. So often it feels that it's very technical in terms, but we tried to put all the links to the actual laws in, and we added a table of contents, so it's easy if you just want to learn about suspensions, you can click on that, and it will take you right to that part of the handbook. And our intent, if the school committee approves the handbook, would also be to have it translated for all of the families who need that as well.
Okay. Aaron, we'll start with the motion, then we'll start with any discussion from there.
Okay. Motion to approve the district-wide student handbook.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Seconded by Carla. All right, any open conversations, questions? Sean?
I've just two quick questions. Dr. Stice, in your memo, you talk about the removal of the sex ed section, which makes a ton of sense. I understand that obviously the content of the course will differ by level, obviously, as an example, so that makes sense. How much do we expect the opt-out procedures to differ by school or by level? I was surprised to see that.
That's a great question. They actually are not going to differ. The language in the handbook, although the course requirements are different, all we're doing is giving parents the notification that they have the right to opt out. And so all of the handbooks will have that same information at the elementary level, then the middle school level, and the high school has its own set of notifications, but the process itself will remain the same, that parents will be given notice of any content taught, and they have the right to opt out. The process remains the same.
Okay. And then the second thing that I would ask, maybe it's just a blind spot for me and everybody else on the committee knows already, but given that approval of the handbook is dictated by MGL, that it's something we're required by law to approve, do we know what we need to know in terms of how we go about translating documents to feel like we've done our diligence, if we approve it in English, and then does it automatically get signed off in other languages that we translate it to? It's an open question, I don't know, but.
I don't think somebody can speak up, or Dr. Stice can, but to my knowledge, there's no MGL requirement that it gets translated. That's an optional thing that we're doing. And I think it's a good thing, but to your point, is it being translated properly?
So we are required to send notification of all important documents in the family's native languages.
Okay.
So we have actually contracted with various companies because translating technical documents is very different than translating quick memos that you could use Google Translate for. So we want to make sure everybody has the exact information and knows who to go to. Because one of the things we want to be sensitive to, although some people speak a specific language at home, they may not read that language. And so we always try to be respectful and say, if you need to speak to an interpreter, we are happy to help to make some of those connections as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all certainly support the idea that we should make it available in a family's home language. You know, what I was getting at, and I think you hit on it, is, you know, not that I think we would do this, are we plugging it into Google Translate, or are we using like certified organizations that, you know, that we can sort of reliably depend on to get it right, I guess?
Yes, so depending on the type of translation, like the handbook, like IEPs or reports, we rely on agencies. If it's, you know, hey, we're having a, I don't know what, a bake sale tomorrow, that may be in Google Translate.
Sure.
But technical language, we do use agencies to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any further notes? The only thing I'll add, Dr. Stice, is first of all, thank you for working with the new legal counsel going through this. But just a quick note, and maybe we can work with Olivia on it. Some of the links don't work for people outside of the district, right? If I'm using my Gmail account, I can't access some of the links in the handbook, and obviously we want them to be open. So we should go through each one of them and make sure they're fully publicly open within the handbook. Otherwise.
Thank you for that. We've been double checking them, so I will make sure. Olivia has worked so hard to help me get this done. We'll make sure that's done tomorrow.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, any further questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor of the motion on the table? All opposed? And it passes 6-0. I'll send you a few notes on some of the ones I can't access, Jen, so just so you have it easy. Okay? All right, so Sean, thank you for that as well, and the clarification. I appreciate the questions. Dr. Milczewski, we'll turn to you for the Community Math Pathways Committee update.
Great. So this is just a very brief update on what's ahead. So in the packet, you should see just about a page-and-a-half memo of what to expect in the next several months for around Math Pathways. A few things I want to bring your attention to. First, I just want to flag that right before our next school committee meeting, so it'll be on September 7th from 5:30 to 6:45, we're going to have our launch of the Math Pathways Committee. This is open to anyone. It'll be a virtual meeting. It will be recorded as well. They'll be able to share it out. This is when we're going to walk through in more detail sort of the rationale of the committee, some of the specific work the committee is going to take on, timelines, all the different things. But I think it helps. It'll be a lot, it'll be more detailed about the problem we're trying to solve and some of the things that we're exploring. So invite anyone to attend, especially anyone who may have interest in serving on this committee. It may be nice to check out that meeting. And again, if you can't make it, you know, you can watch the recording. There is going to be a pretty quick turnaround then to sign on. We're going to ask anyone who's interested to sign on to let us know by September 8th. So excited to get people on board. Two things I just wanted to flag tonight as a result of some conversations I've had with people in the community. One is around just like the urgency of this problem. I think the committee's been very clear this is something that the committee feels is an urgent issue to tackle. I've also heard that similar perspective from some of our educators, from many of our families, and many of our students as well too. So I think hopefully, you know, you see that urgency reflected in this memo, and also with the timeline. This project would close by November 2nd, which at that point the committee would make a recommendation to our administration on sort of the best path forward, or some potential paths forward too. So we expect that we are going to be making some movement and some updates, you know, within the next couple of months. The last thing I want to make a note on too, which is the questions around why have community input on this too. I think there's several reasons. I think first, we've seen in this community that we've gained traction on a lot of our different work when we involve the community. Some of the work that's been done by Reading and Reading, I think really was a catalyst, actually even laid the foundation, and then was a catalyst for moving a lot of our work forward with our shifts in literacy. So I think kind of building off that model. Two, we think there's a lot of people in the community who have expertise in this issue, expertise and experience to bring to the team, whether that's a family or a student who feels that they're, you know, had options limited as a result of a certain structure, or people who live some of this work. We have many in our community who live out sort of this type of work in their day-to-day jobs. We think that it's important for us to involve those stakeholders just to broaden our conversations and bring that expertise and experience to the table. The other thing I'd just like to add too is that we feel this is something that is not just a solution in terms of structures in a school, but this is also something we need. It's a broader community problem and a community issue, and we just feel like it's important to have other people around the table to help us kind of work through it too. So someone asked, I know people have asked, is this something the administration could do without community support? Yeah, we could certainly, try. I just don't think the conversation would necessarily hit on all of the different pieces of the problem, especially since this has sort of existed for a long time without bringing other people to the table. So we are excited to bring people to the table to support some of our educators and our administration in this. I'd just like to pause there and open up to any questions either about what's ahead or about what's written in the memo.
In addition to people volunteering to join the committee, I assume the meetings are open if anyone wanted to just come
They are.
listen to the conversation
They are.
unfolding?
Yep,
Okay,
correct.
great.
And they will all, you probably can notice here on the flow, they're all held before our school committee meetings from 5:30 to 6:45 too, so that helps.
Sean, did you have a further question?
No, I was just making sure you saw Aaron over there.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee? I mean, Dr. Milczewski, we talked about it, but I appreciate the urgency that's shown in it and the public transparency that's shown in it as well. That's like you said, continuous from some of our other processes, and I do believe fully that helps embrace the buy-in. While there are some people who are saying why, I think we've heard over time that people aren't involved, and so we're trying to address. You can't please all the people all the time, but we're trying to address a lot of that feedback process. Okay. Chuck?
And I think, you correctly stated that the reading and reading should be a benchmark for any of these types of committee that work very well, so.
We're really excited about this. No easy lift, but we're excited about it.
Is there any, I guess one more question, is there any thought in terms of how you're going to fill, I mean, I'm so backed up with other things, so maybe it's already mentioned in the memo, I apologize, I should have read that in more detail, but is there any thought in terms of how many from the community you're going to involve? If you get like 50 people, are you going to involve all 50, or are you going to say, hey, we're going to, let's be efficient with 15 or 20 or 10 or whatever the number is?
Just hit the magic number that we're leaning towards. At this point, we put in the memo 15 to 20. You see the different stakeholder groups, parents and guardian, alumni, community partners, educators, Plaza School Committee members. We think if the committee gets much larger than that, it might be harder to kind of narrow in on being able to get to a recommendation. But we, again, think if we were smaller than that, we may not have the breadth of experience and expertise in the room that we want to. So that's the number we're looking at now, but it also just could shift slightly depending on how many people apply as well.
Okay. I mean, with reading and reading, we were basically able to take all comers.
We were.
We'll see whether that's the case with math.
We also have thought about too, and I guess maybe I'm showing our cards a little bit, or just open the curtain a little bit, is that at certain points in this process of opening it up for feedback too. Say after the second and third meeting, we're at, a couple of decision points, we may consider, throwing out 4 or 5 models to the community, getting feedback on those, and then this committee synthesizing some of that feedback too. So even if you're not on the committee, we're thinking about what are some of those opportunities for other people to give feedback too. So we haven't mapped those out yet, but that's something we're doing now, is thinking about where those spots could be.
Okay. Anything else? Great. Thank you, and thank you to the team who's putting all the work together for this as well. Okay, so let's move on. We will move to the second reading of DBDA. We're going to start that with a motion, and any changes we make to it from there will be, amendments of some sort we'll quickly vote on as we want to. There's the one that we know that's coming that, Sean and I, mostly Sean, have worked on that we can take on, and then if there's anything else people want to add or adjust as we go through that, we'll go from there. So, Aaron, if you'd start with our motion while I start the share.
Motion to approve the second reading of policy DBDA, Special Education Reserve Fund.
Second.
All right, seconded by Sean. So we are now active in the edits. Sean, since you put the first draft of stuff together, I don't know if you saw my feedback right before you came here,
Yeah, I did.
but if you want to just kind of walk through those, and I'll see if I can get this to be bigger so other people can see it.
Sure. So just to refresh everybody on the piece that we got stuck on last time, it was around sort of setting limits and minimums and ceilings for how we allocate to the reserve fund. So I proposed a couple of things, which you can see on the screen there on the right-hand side now in the comment that Tom has. One is I thought just by merely sort of resequencing the bullets, it made it a little bit cleaner. But the language that I am suggesting is, first bullet would read, after the fund's second year in existence, the committee will endeavor to maintain a minimum of 0.5% of the annual net school spending of the district within the fund. So that sets our floor. The next bullet would be, the committee will seek to add money to the fund at year end sufficient to maintain a balance of approximately 1% of the annual net school spending. That creates kind of our target. And then the ceiling comes in the third bullet, which is, should the fund's balance exceed 1.5% of the annual net school spending during a fiscal year, the committee will budget to spend down the fund during the next fiscal year to return the fund to the 1% level. Where Tom and I had a back and forth, and I tend to agree, I think instead of saying in that third bullet, return the fund to the 1% level, we should commit to spending down in the next year to return to the fund to that range of 1 to 1.5% and provide some flexibility to recognize that it may not make sense to spend down the whole 0.5%, 0.6%, whatever in 1 year. Similarly, we may be anticipating, more uncertainty with our special ed costs in the future year. So we don't want to box ourselves into going from, say, 1.6 to 1 in a single year, but just to get ourselves back into that range of 1 to 1.5.
Where do these fall relative to what we put in this year, these percentages?
So we are at 175,000. The 0.5% is 230,000, give or take, 235,000.
Okay.
So we're a little bit below that, but not terribly below. So yeah, I mean, if we go up at the end of this year, we get ourselves to the 1% or close to the 1%, that would be another, almost $300,000 we can put in there.
Right. And our commitment per this policy is just to get over that 0.5% point. So we'd only have, less than 100,000 that we would have to commit this year to be able to meet that goal.
As long as we have it available.
Right. Yeah, and we
Can't
did.
spend something we don't have.
And we do
right?
have the language in that one, will endeavor to.
Will endeavor, exactly.
Yeah, because that's a key point. We can't assume that every year we'll have significant unspent funds at the end of the year.
So if we take the combined motion to a degree, that last paragraph, last bullet is going to read, should the fund's balance exceed 1.5% of the annual net school spending during a fiscal year, the committee will budget to spend down a sufficient amount to return below the 1.5%, but above the 1% level. Okay?
Yeah, thank you both for your work on that.
Yeah.
I think it very clearly articulates what we were trying to get at
Yeah, I mean, it was,
last time.
we were all coming
I
to
missed
the same place and just struggling to find the words. So
Right.
it's much easier to step back and come back to it later.
Right.
Yeah.
Good, I missed that. Huh?
In fairness, we sort of called the
too
moment
long.
pretty quickly and cut ourselves off
Right.
and said, let's come back to this.
Right.
But yeah,
Okay. So, I mean, rather than just copying and pasting in there, wasting time, we'll just leave that. That's the motion on the table. That amendment is the motion on the table right now. As the subcommittee, I think we'd take that as a friendly amendment, but, I'm looking and nodding. So that is now the motion. We'll say that. I don't need to do a formal vote on just the amendment since the subcommittee's looking and saying it's positive. So it is now this amended version, and when we finalize it, I'll incorporate that in the language as we just spoke about. I don't need to waste our time now going through that. Any other feedback, questions, or thoughts as you've read through the policy over the last couple of weeks to see if there's anything else that changes? Anything from the administration? No? I haven't received any feedback from Sharon, Fidel, Jackie, or Ed on it either, positively or negatively. So I think we're in good shape then at this point in time. All right, so I guess the motion's on the table. So all in favor of the second, closing the second reading? All opposed? And it passes 6-0. So, Sean, thank you again for that.
Sure.
All right, and that is now saved. So in the packet is a summary of the liaison subcommittee and charter review committee updates. Just a quick summary. Chuck pulled Chuck off select board and finance committee because he's picking up charter review. And thank you, Chuck, for picking up charter review. That's huge for all of us. Put Sean on put me on select board and Sean on finance committee. And Aaron picked up the coalition because Chuck is picking up charter as well. So those are the only changes. I also struck the RTA salary, JLMC, because technically it expired. It may come up again in some other discussions, but for the time being, I struck it off because it's expired through what the expectation was. Any other questions, thoughts, feedback? Okay. So let's move forward. We are cooking with gas, and we're ahead of schedule, so I like that. Moving on to policy, section 3A, and Aaron, let's start with your motion first.
Motion to waive the reading of all policies in section E3 of the agenda.
Second.
Seconded by Sean. Any discussion? No. All in favor of waiving the readings? All opposed? And we've waived them for those three. Aaron, why don't you start with the motion for 3A, and I'll pull it up and share it. ADF.
Sorry, I was like.
Yeah.
Motion to adopt policy ADF, School District Wellness Program.
Second.
Seconded by Carla, so thank you. The packet includes some background in this, but just just so we have it as part of the discussion. Mary Juliana and the wellness team brought this to us as a collective to the subcommittee using the old policy, which is also in the packet. And we did a comparison in one of our early meetings that says, well, this is vastly different from the MASC model and much more complex than the MASC model. So do we want to maintain that, or do we want to go more towards the MASC model? And we agreed as a subcommittee and administrative team, we wanted to go to the MASC model, but then they were going to take it and make additional changes to that to make it Reading specific. So in your packet, you have our old policy, the MASC model policy, and then this policy, which is the one that we've all agreed to as a subcommittee and voted 3-0 to approve. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, this is pending, we're pending this approval to file a grant or two. So we wanted to get through this and get any feedback from anybody here, hopefully get the approval so that we can move forward with the grant appropriately. Dr. Milichewski, is there anything you want to add? Okay. So it is on the table now. Any questions, any comments, any feedback that people have on this one? Sarah?
There's a couple clarifying questions. So the goal of the Wellness Committee and coordinators are to oversee kind of this implementation of this policy across all building levels for the district, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then in terms of I don't want to speak, it's under the nutrition guidelines section specifically, but in terms of establishing procedures, is that the purview of the committee as well, just as a district, I think? So does that mean the committee will work on establishing those procedures? Does it mean central office? Does it mean at each school building?
Procedures are generally an administrative task.
And so would the committee have a part, like oversee part, like establishing that there's consistency? Because that's been an area of need, that they're wildly different across school buildings.
And that was brought up in the conversations, I think, some of the differences that are across the schools. And the goal is to have them as centrally aligned as possible. Obviously, some kids have different needs, and there's some challenges you
Sure,
have
but
to
like
work through.
K to 5 and then.
The ideal is that you're
Okay.
keeping them as centrally on as possible. So I would say that's mostly going to be in the role of the coordinators, which is, for lack of a better way to say it, the day government. It may come up as probably one of the first conversations of the greater committee. Here's the procedures we've built. I don't think it's built into the policy that says that necessarily, but I think that's an expectation probably. If it becomes a big enough conversation at the Wellness Committee may bring it to us to accept. Sometimes we, as a school committee, will accept procedures as well. We don't necessarily have to. Okay. Aaron or Chuck, anything you want to add from the subcommittee conversations?
No, it's just a good discussion, and,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of that's captured here, yeah.
Okay. Any further conversation? All right, so all in favor of adopting, because the motion is on the table? All opposed? Seeing none, it passes 6-0. So thank you. There's some minor things we'll look at later, but that's okay. All right, so let's move to the next one, and if you start with the motion, Aaron, and I'll pull it up.
Do we need to appoint someone to the?
That's the
Later.
later topic.
Okay. Motion to adopt policy DJE procurement requirements.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Sean. Okay, this one is quite a bit more extensive. And the background is quite a bit more complex as well. I'm going to show the no markup version so you can see the cleaner version. This one went through the policy subcommittee probably 2 or 3 times before it finally came for approval. In fact, I think it went 3 times. The MASC version didn't have sufficient information from our perspective, and we worked closely with Susan and legal counsel to adjust it. It also had incorrect numbers because the law changed late last year to allow up to 100,000 instead of 50,000. So we wanted to include that. And we wanted to differentiate between the types of processes as well as the places where in the state collectives we don't have to worry about bidding because the state has already done it. So the policy as written has been greatly reviewed with Susan, obviously Dr. Pinto's predecessor. I had a chance to sit down with Dr. Pinto and go through it as well. Our legal counsel has reviewed it, and we think it is now sufficient for how we operate the district and is in alignment with state law. It allows the flexibility where there is flexibility while also saying the differences between invitations and RFPs and stuff like that. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions, comments, concerns, or updates. All right, seeing none. The motion's on the table. All in favor? And all opposed, and that passes 6-0 as well. So thank you very much, Aaron, and we will move to the next one.
Motion to adopt policy KCD, public gifts to the schools.
Second.
Seconded by Carla. This one is a little bit more straightforward. Basic update with MASC is where this one's coming from. There is not much more to it. There's not much more debate or discussion, really. It's a basic, simple update with cross-references added and a few other things, legal references added and things like that. It also passed 3-0 from the policy subcommittee. Any feedback, questions, or comments?
On the third paragraph, around regardless of donor intent, any gift of cash, we often get gifts of cash, from friends of whatever to pay this salary, that kind of thing. Is this saying, it's not clear to me whether this is intended to say, we'll only use it for what the donor's intent was, or technically the school committee can do what it will with that money. I think it's the latter.
It's the latter.
It's the latter.
Yeah, okay.
Technically, we
Had a lot of
can.
discussion about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So technically, by law, we can do whatever we want to. We don't usually.
of course, right.
But this still allows us to keep in compliance with the law and say, we'll accept it, but we may spend it in
Yeah.
other ways.
Obviously, the continuing goodwill of generous donations is more important than any one donation we might choose to redirect. So,
Yep.
yeah, understood. Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
I have one change here that Grammarly is suggesting that others I want some other feedback on. It's the last sentence of it. It says the committee directs the superintendent to assure. Grammarly is suggesting ensure.
I agree with Grammarly.
Yeah, I do too.
Okay? Any other conversation? All right, so the policy as amended now, all in favor? All opposed? And it passes as well, 6-0. So that is now saved. And Aaron, the last one?
Motion to adopt policy DBJ, Budget Transfer Authority.
Second.
Seconded by Sean. This one is rather simple. We've already reviewed this as a committee and subcommittee earlier this year and approved it before with other MSC updates. This one, however, now because of the creation of DBDA that we just approved earlier, needs to allow for us to transfer for DBDA. So we added that, and we added the cross-reference for DBDA as well. Any questions, comments, concerns on this one? Nope. Okay, let's move to the vote. All in favor? All opposed? And it passes 6-0 as well. All right, so thank you. So that moves us to the next item on our agenda, which is the appointment of a school committee member to the Wellness Committee. We briefly discussed it in the ADF conversation with the Wellness Committee. The intent is for that to meet basically quarterly. With ADF, we now need a school committee member on that committee, ideally also to make sure we stay consistent. That's one of the roles of that job. So any thoughts? Anybody want to stick their hand in the air to volunteer to be a member of the Wellness Committee?
I would volunteer.
Aaron? Okay. Anybody else? All right, that makes it easy. Aaron, you're appointed. Hereby appointed. Done.
Well, it says at least one. We could have had three of us if we wanted to.
Let's keep it simple. We'll go with one. If somebody wants to join later, then we can add somebody else at a later point in time.
It goes good with coalition, so.
Coalition, yeah, there's a lot of other things that could go with, yep. Okay, so that moves us on to reports. Dr. Stice, do we still have you? Yes, we do. We have 23 minutes for reports, and we are on task and on topic. I'm making you happy.
Like this every single.
Don't feel you have to take credit.
It can still be brief, though.
We did direct everyone on our team to be brief, so we won't hit the 23.
Okay.
I will definitely not use 23 minutes. So the first thing I'd like to do is thank the CPAC for coming and speaking to our all of our leadership team, our principals, assistant principals, and team chairs. They really helped us set a great tone for the year around inclusivity and high expectations for all. And we were really grateful for their partnership with kicking off the school year with our administration team. So a big thank you to them. And we also just wanted to highlight that this week we started our new staff orientation. We had 57 new staff attending, and it's been really very exciting. We are thrilled to have such amazingly talented and enthusiastic new staff. And Sarah Hardy and I would just like to thank Fran and Mackenzie and Olivia, who really helped us get everything going, and we couldn't have done it without them. Some of the highlights that I just wanted to share with you is that all of the teaching staff received an overview of Reading in the Brain, and we also are very, very fortunate, and thank you to the committee for continuing to support our work in reading, because today and tomorrow, Dr. Melissa Orkin has been joining all of our special education staff to talk about target literacy instruction through the Crafting Minds protocol, and it has been an amazing training. We also had some of our team chairs and principals attend the training as well, which was great. And while we're just highlighting a few things about literacy, last year, as you know, we had trained several of our special education staff in Wilson. This year, on September 20th and 29th, we have another set of staff being trained in Seeing Stars. And we are very excited that beginning on September 15th and then going all throughout the year, we have a group of special education teachers, including all of our lead program staff, who are attending a Crafting Minds progress monitoring training. So they will be able to really do focused, targeted progress monitoring and then reporting out at meetings. So we are just really, really thrilled with all of that, and we'd like to just thank the committee for all of the support. And the last thing, Renee Lamaro, who is our special education literacy specialist, just asked me to remind everyone that on our special education portion of the website, under slides and videos, are all of the trainings we did for parents a few years ago. So if parents do have questions about reading and the brain and how it works, they are available, and we're more than happy to talk to anybody and answer any questions. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stice. Any questions from the committee? No?
Sounds great.
All right, so let's move on to Dr. Pinto.
Good evening. Got a couple of quick items that I just wanted to share with you. So IT, our network manager Julian Carr was successful along with his team in distributing freshman laptops this past week. So happy to be, I understand that it's the earliest it's taken place, so happy that that's moved ahead. Food services, I managed to get around to multiple schools as they had the installation of new food services equipment, which was gratifying. Catherine Franzetti's very excited about that, as are we. So that happened here at the high school, as well as Birch Meadow, Joshua Eaton, and this Saturday there's installation of an item taking place at Coolidge. And as far as transportation is concerned, we've got finalized routes. I went out and met with the transportation company along with Olivia Lejeune, and we were able to get one route adjusted to a slightly later time to alleviate the long wait time students would have when they arrived at schools. We're at a bit of stuck in a bit of a position with schools starting at roughly the same time, so there is unfortunately, we weren't able to remedy all of the wait times. That's something to keep in mind going forward, and we're looking forward to riding the buses with the arrival of school next week to see what's happening on them. So those are the things I want to share with you, along with a Met FinCon, the Finance Committee last night formally at Town Hall, so I was pleased to meet them in person.
Let's add on that too. So Dr. Pinto and Olivia Lejeune are going to be riding 2 days. First
We're
2
going to try
days,
and ride all the routes, yeah.
all the routes. That's awesome.
Just want to see what's happening.
Starting down in Boston, too?
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
You're starting in Boston, asking for our Boston resident students.
Yeah, so the Metco routes, we'll explore that with Curtis, see what's happening. Yeah,
Okay.
we'd like to do that, it's a long ride.
It's great.
Great. Dr. Milichewski, it's your turn now.
Yep. And I have a just really quick one. As everyone knows, our staff start Monday, come back, and our students we welcome back on Wednesday. It's been really great seeing around the high school, just all activities starting up. You feel the buzz coming back. The only thing we'd like to just ask, if any were a couple positions we're still hiring for, we have a couple custodial positions and a couple paraprofessional positions. So if you know anyone in the community looking for a job, looking for maybe a transition, custodial staff and paraprofessional positions, we have a couple of openings. Let anyone on our team know. Other than that, we're in a pretty good position with staffing. We cannot wait to welcome students back on Wednesday.
Great, thank you. All right, liaisons, we'll start down at the end. Chuck?
The SWEC has met twice now since last time I was here, and both of those meetings were predominantly to discuss the RFI, request for information, and finalizing it. And Fidel just sent it to us a couple days ago, and it's ready to go. So we'll see what happens with that. And the other big topic was, what are we going to do about pickleball? And I've also had a recreation meeting since the last time I was here, and that was basically the entire discussion was pickleball and what to do about that. So all positive. I mean, it's a good thing. We'll figure it out, but the SWEC has taken a life. There's a lot of people that want to do a lot of things with that land, so we'll see what happens.
Okay, thank you. Carla?
We had another Killam School Building Committee we're having those regularly. The request for information, request for services document is soon to go out. I should say, we will be submitting it to the MSBA soon, where the committee is putting their comments together for that. We were presented with from MSBA with two separate schedules. One was a more aggressive accelerated schedule, and one was a little bit more relaxed, and the committee unanimously voted for the more accelerated schedule, which was doable, knowing that if something slipped, we could kind of fall back into the other schedule, so we're on schedule.
Great, thank you. I think one of the things we, you and I don't know if we told the committee, but we're going to have to co-sign a letter for town meeting as well. So you and I, you'll write it probably, we'll kind of co-sign it as a school committee on that as well, with all the work you all are doing. So I just want to thank you, because I know that's exhaustive
Welcome.
in detail. Okay, so Sean?
Can I ask Carla one follow-up question?
Absolutely, follow it.
Does that schedule extend like through like a debt override vote, or is it just for the design phase? Like what does that
For
cover?
Just the design phase.
Okay.
Basically, they're anchoring them to their meetings.
Okay,
So we have to submit.
Sure. Yeah,
And
of
all
course.
that, so
Yep.
they said you can pick this meeting or that meeting.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I have no report.
Okay,
And just to follow up on that, we will be given shortly from Colliers a projected schedule of the entire
Got it.
project.
Thank
We're
you.
working on it now.
Thanks.
and will that include public feedback forums, all that kind of fun stuff that we'll be engaged in as well?
It's going to be a more skeletal one, but all of the specific days will be there, and then we'll be able to plug things in between.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
No
Sarah?
report, Carla already did a great job.
Carla covered it for you, okay. Aaron?
No report.
All right, my report, I guess, Finance Committee-wise, I haven't been able to watch the whole meeting yet, but I know that free cash, while not fully certified, was reported at 18.1 million last night, which is about $1 million below where it was last year, which was about 19 million. The stabilization fund is still where it is and everything else. So that's that. That's actually quite good, considering how much was spent out of free cash in the last year, which was about 6.7 million, if I recall. So 19 minus 6.7, they get us all the way back up to 18, means we had a lot of regeneration, and then most of that came from investments, is what my understanding is. So that will feed into some things for us. The other thing I wanted the committee to know is we've pushed a few things back from an agenda perspective because of the timing of this meeting and because of other things that were happening over the summer. So at our next meeting, we'll have some pretty heavy topic conversations, one of which is the initial superintendent goal discussion. Dr. Milczewski's been working through that, and we'll have that ready for the 7th. We'll finalize them at the meeting on the 18th, which will be one of the earlier times we finalize those goals, but because of all the work we've done over the summer, we think we're in pretty good shape for that. We also have the student handbook from RMHS that will be on 9/7, which technically is a little bit late, but given the leadership change and some of the other stuff that's happening, we felt like that was most appropriate. Gave Jess Callahan time to meet with school council and get things taken care of and whatnot. And like we heard, some of the items came out of the district handbook, so they've got to go back into the school handbook and whatnot, so that's going to have to be part of that 9/7 meeting. And the final one is we're going to have an MBTA communities presentation in that meeting as well, just to go through what the impact might be for the schools, how the buildable stuff works for us, and most of it is along the lines of what estimates are they using versus are we using, because one of the big community feedback concerns is the impact on schools that comes with the MBTA communities adjustment. As a high level, that's, basically a half mile around the train station in the entire circumference around it. It needs to be more built up than it is. So there's challenges to that, obviously, but there's also, with that, should come new growth revenue for the town as well. We'll see when the push comes to shove how that happens. Carla, go ahead.
Who's doing that presentation?
Andrew McNichol from the town is going to do that presentation for us.
Is that the same email we got for town meeting members from Laura today?
I didn't see the email from Laura yet. Did it include a presentation?
No, but we got something, I thought, on the MBTA too. I know we got the trash one.
We got a survey a while ago.
We've received a couple of the surveys
Okay.
on MBTA, and this has some of the results of that survey, and they wanted to coalesce with us about the importance of it and what it needs and how it impacts schools and, you know, which growth model we're using versus which growth model they're using, and so we're all aligned, basically. So that'll be part of that conversation. Okay? All right, with that said, we are 10 minutes early, but I have no objection to us adjourning early, and we'll start the executive session on time, and we'll go from there. It gives us a few minutes before everybody else comes in from the Finance Committee, as the case as necessary. So, Aaron, will you read our motion, please?
Motion to enter into joint executive session and not return to open session with the Finance Committee to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, Reading Teachers Association, Reading Paraeducators Association, and Reading Administrative Secretaries Association. As the chair states, an open meeting will have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the Reading School Committee.
Seconded by Carla. Since it's executive session, we need to do a roll call vote, so by name, Chuck?
Yes.
Carla?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
And Tom, yes. So we are hereby adjourned. We'll start that meeting at 7.